recording. And get these up. All right. Well, again, I don't know if you can hear me. Hello?
Loud and
Yes,
clear, Pastor
yes,
Tim.
Pastor, we hear you.
All right.
Coming 5 by 5.
Okay, my side was slow. Sometimes have been having trouble with my Zoom here, but okay, good. I'm glad you can hear me. All right. Well, this week I would like to continue on the topic that we were looking at, started last time together, and that is focusing on the structure of Hebrew poetry, particularly parallelism. If you'll remember, last time we met, we summarized the three key elements of Hebrew poetry, the three primary characteristics that you will often see in Hebrew poetry, and that is terseness, structure, imagery. Again, terseness is the idea of brief, short statements to convey each point. Structure is there's an intentional structure in Hebrew poetry, both in the form of the structure of the poem as a whole, broken up into stanzas, and also structure within each verse. Much of Hebrew poetry has what is called parallelism, where every verse, or most verses in Hebrew poetry, are 2 lines per verse. And you might see this term used at times if you're reading a commentary, bicola, which just means 2 lines. Sometimes there'll be 3 lines within a verse, and that is called tricola. Okay, so I'll be using these terms from time to time. So if we have a verse in which there are 2 lines, that will be referred to as bicola. 3 lines, tricola, and 4 or more lines is called Coca-Cola. All right. So joke lang. I mean,
That's flagging. That's
That's good.
flagging.
That's a good one.
thank you for laughing. I appreciate
Exactly what I'm thinking.
it. So maybe that last one I might be a little wrong, but there are
Pepsi Cola
bicola and
might get
tricola.
jealous. Pepsi Cola might get jealous.
Pepsi Cola, no Pepsi Cola. Um, Typically, the most common that we'll see is bicola, 2 lines per verse. And another feature within each verse is what's called parallelism, which uh, is an intentional relationship between those lines. And we also see, by the way, we will see parallelism in 3 lines or more as well. All right. And then thirdly is imagery. Imagery. That is Hebrew poetry. This is one, the most common feature in Hebrew poetry is imagery, pictures drawn with words, often through the use of figurative language. Now, last time we met, we were in the middle of our discussion on parallelism, which is one of the structures we will see in Hebrew poetry. And we'd gone through several examples, and we're going to go through several more today. These are the different kinds of Hebrew parallelism that we will see in Old Testament poetry and actually in Hebrew poetry in general. Synonymous parallelism, that is where one line repeats the other, and they are also grammatically similar. Okay. In contrastive parallelism, one line contrasts the other. Okay, contrasts the other line. Developmental parallelism, if you'll remember, is where one line develops the other line. That is connected to that line, but the lines are connected together, but they're not synonymous. They're not saying the exact same thing. They're not contrastive. That is, they're not saying opposite things, but they're developmental. they're linked together in a different way. And there's three ways that they could be linked together in a developmental parallelism. One is by one line expands or adds upon the other, adds more information. Or another type is explanation or illustration. That is, one line explains or is an illustration of the other. And then finally, we have the reason, or we could even say purpose or result. That is, one line gives the reason for the other or the result of the other. All right. There's a special form of parallelism where it's called chiasm. The second line is given in reverse order grammatically, I should say that, grammatically compared to the first. And then finally, if there are some times where the parallelism is not clear. So we call that, umbut. We don't know what it is, okay? But typically, you will be able to identify it, and usually it's going to be one of these first three types, okay? So what we're going to do is spend a lot of our time this morning just going through different passages, identifying the parallelism. And the reason I want us to do this is parallelism, as we try to identify the type or figure out what is the relationship between these two lines, that forces us to think about what is the author trying to communicate and how is he trying to communicate that. It's very similar to what we were doing with diagramming, where we were trying to understand what is the connection between this phrase or clause with another. All right, it's not diagramming. That actually we will do diagramming in Hebrew poetry, but it's kind of a similar. It forces us to think about the text like when we are diagramming, trying to understand, okay, what is the relationship between these two lines? Now, again, parallelism focuses on a verse, all right, the relationship within a verse. Let's keep that in mind. Parallelism focuses on the relationship between lines within a verse, okay? So we're not looking between verses at this point. We're actually just looking at one particular verse and trying to understand the relationship between the lines within the verse. Again, Hebrew poetry is intentionally written with either 2 lines, again, that's bicola, or 3 lines, tricola, or at times more than 3 lines within a verse. And often those lines, whether it is 2 or more, have a relationship together within that particular verse. Okay? So I'm going to keep these different types here so you can see them. Maybe what I'll do is number them. Okay, I'll keep these here, and we're going to go through several examples together. All right, so I'll have you take a look at the particular example and then read it for us, and then I would like you to identify what kind of parallelism you see or what kind of parallelism you think. All right, let me just finish numbering these. Okay, there we go. And then I will split this. Okay, there they are. The 5 different types. Now, let's look at some examples. Oh, I already did that. I'll do this. All right. Okay, hopefully you can see that okay. All right. So again, read the passage and then identify what kind of parallelism you see here, and we'll just then talk about it. So we'll start with you, Sir Sid. I'll give you this one, Proverbs 3:17. And all these passages, by the way, will be from Proverbs, all these examples.
Proverbs 3:17. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. Um, this is synonymous, ways, paths, pleasant, and peace. They are synonymous.
Yes, very good. This is synonymous, and notice, as Sid mentioned, the synonyms here. Her ways, all right, her paths. And then the verbal idea is are, A-R-E, and then pleasant ways, and that's synonymous with peace, okay? So basically, we see here, this is synonymous parallelism, where basically the same thing is being said in both lines by using synonyms. Notice, as Sid said, ways and paths. Those are a similar idea. Again, pleasant ways and peace. Again, a similar idea being conveyed. So we call this synonymous parallelism. And notice also grammatically how they are similar. Her ways, subject, our verb, pleasant ways, object, or in this case, a predicate noun. And then her paths, subject, are, again, the verbal idea, and peace, predicate adjective. All right? Any questions on that? Okay, good. Let's look at the next one. Actually, Brother Arn, I'm going to give this one to you. Read the passage and then let us know what kind of parallelism you think this is. Brother Arn?
Proverbs chapter 13, verse 3. The one who guards his mouth preserves his life. The one who opens wide his lips comes to ruin. Okay, the subject. Okay. The one is similar. Who guards his mouth and who opens his lips. Opposite.
Okay,
And
good.
then preserves and comes the verbal word. And then his life and ruin is opposite or contrasted. So therefore, Proverbs chapter 13, verse 3 is contrastive. Am I right, Pastor?
Yes, very good. This is contrastive. Notice, as Arn pointed out very well, good job analyzing this. Who guards his mouth is the opposite to who opens wide his lips. So one guy, he's being careful, right? Guarding his mouth. The other guy is not being careful, opening wide his lips. And then what happens to the one who guards his mouth? He preserves his life. What happens to the one who opens wide his lips? He comes to ruin. So these are contrastive. That is the second line. The second line contrasts the first. Okay. Now notice that we have a contrast even though the word but was not in the passage. Okay. So you don't need to have but there to tell you it's contrasting. Just think about what is being said. Often passage will have the word but in the text, but in this case it did not. But we can clearly see there's a contrast here. All right. And notice they're grammatically similar. The one who guards his mouth, the one who opens wide his lips, and then preserves his life comes to ruin. Those are grammatically similar in their structure. Okay? Contrastive parallelism. Any questions on that one? Great job. All right. Let's have the next one here. If we can have Michael, go ahead and take this one. Proverbs 14, verse 17. You'll need to unmute. There you go.
A quick-tempered man acts foolishly, and a man of evil devices is hated. Uh, it is a contrastive
Okay,
assertion.
what's being contrasted?
Yeah. Um, quick-tempered man. No. I think it's no. It's not contrastive because foolishly quick-tempered man and a man of evil devices.
Yeah, it's the
Uh,
same kind of person, right? They're
yeah.
both
Same
both
kind of
bad.
person. Synon synonymous.
Okay.
Synonymous.
What makes you think it's synonymous?
Because of a quick-tempered man and a man of evil devices are the same person, and they the result is always bad, foolishly and hated.
Yes, but notice one thing. Notice here it said, so I agree, a quick-tempered man and a man of evil devices, those are both, not good. Okay, both speaking of a bad guy. But notice this first line says acts foolishly.
Okay.
So the first line, notice here he's doing something. But notice the second line. He is something. You see that?
Okay.
So a synonymous one would have been something like this. If it were synonymous, it would have been a quick-tempered man acts foolishly, and a man of evil devices does wrong, or something like that. All right, that would be parallel or synonymous.
Okay.
Okay, because both, notice the verb, acts and does, foolishly and wrong. Okay, that would be more synonymous. But up here, he makes a statement: a quick-tempered man acts foolishly. So he's doing something in that first line, but in the second line, he's being described. He is something. So it's not synonymous, and it's not contrastive.
Okay.
Yes,
What's
sir.
another
Developmental.
option?
Developmental.
Developmental.
Okay, what kind of developmental? We've got three.
Expansion. Expansion.
Reason or result.
Explanation.
Reason or result.
Well, okay. It could be a result. I would see it more of the idea of addition. It's adding more information to the first line.
Expansion. Yes. Expansion.
Expansion.
I think it's probably more, it's certainly developmental. The second line is developing the first line. I would say, I think it's expansion or adding. It's adding more information.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
that would be my view. If it were a result, we might have something more like a quick-tempered man acts foolishly. And normally you won't have this and a man of evil devices. Normally you would have for result something like, I don't know, thus he is hated, or it would be a little bit different. But in this case, it's basically saying two things about a particular person. Okay, that's why I would say expansion or addition. All right, any questions on that? Some of these we're going to find, it's kind of like when we're diagramming. Sometimes you think, well, it could be connected to this. It's possible it's connected to this over here. We will have that at times with parallelism where it won't always be perfectly obvious, but we still put an idea what you think and why, and then see what makes more sense. Okay. Let's see who do I want? Alan, why don't you try this one?
The evil will bow down before the good, and the wicked at the gates of the righteous. It's contrastive.
Okay,
Contrastive.
what's being contrasted?
No. The evil will bow down before the good, the wicked at the gates of the righteous. I think it's synonymous. Synonymous.
Okay, what's being compared here? Let's look at it. We have the evil, the wicked, right?
The wicked.
And we have will bow down. Now, what's interesting is there's nothing in the second line. There's no verb in the second line, is there?
Developmental.
Well, don't keep guessing. Just let's just talk it through here for a minute. So the evil will bow down, okay, before the good. All right, we'll have another color here. So before the good and at the gates of the righteous, those are similar in idea. The problem is there's no verb in the second line.
Yeah.
It's missing.
Will bow down.
But yes, the verbal idea is the same though.
Yes, sir. It's already implied.
Yes, it's implied. We talked about this last week. It's really a poetic device known as
Terseness.
well, yes, terseness is the reason for it. Give me a second here. Terseness is why this happens, but what the device is called ellipsis.
Okay.
Ellipsis is the intentional omission of a word or words, but they are implied there. Okay, and as Sid said, the reason for this is terseness. Okay, again, the poetic writers want to make short statements, and so sometimes to do that, they will eliminate or omit a word or words from one line or the other. But because we know there's parallelism here, that we know that the idea is intended to be there. So even though will bow down is not in the second line, the concept is meant to be understood that way. Okay? And so that will throw us off, because without this, it might look like it's developmental.
So it's synonymous.
It's synonymous because we just have to break down each line. That's why I did it this way. The evil and the wicked, those are clearly synonyms, right? The same idea. And then before the good, we have the good here and the righteous. Those are synonymous. And before the good, at the gates of the righteous, that's the same concept, right? The issue is that the second line has no verb. So there has to be a verb, right? Because if it's just the wicked at the gates of the righteous, well, the wicked, what at the gates of the righteous? Well, in this verse, obviously the poet intends to have the same concept. The wicked will bow down at the gates of the righteous. You see this? This is going to come up over and over when we deal with Hebrew poetry. Ellipsis is very, very common. Okay?
Okay.
So, sorry, Alan, that was a little bit tricky for you because of that, but you will see the fact that we saw this in an example last week as well. So we will see this usually every poem will have at least one example of ellipsis in one of the verses. Sometimes a poem will have several places where words have been intentionally removed, but the idea is still meant to be understood as there. So in this case, we actually do have synonymous parallelism. Okay, the second line repeats the first. Can you guys see that? Now you might say, well, wait a minute. At the gates, well, there's no gate up here in the first line. Well, but still the concept is similar, all right? The picture is similar. The evil will bow down before the good. And in the second line, he does mention a particular location, but it's still a synonymous idea. The same idea is expressed in both lines, that the evil are going to come under, be subservient to, serve, honor, respect, something like that, the good. Okay? And this reminds us, by the way, we're not going to talk about this for a while. Maybe I should wait. Yeah. Well, here, I'll mention it now, and then we'll come back to it later. This also shows us, by the way, that in wisdom literature, because these are Proverbs, right? This is wisdom literature. Wisdom literature gives us truisms, things that are generally true. But it's not always that way, right? Because there are many examples in history where the evil don't bow down before the good, right? So does that mean this proverb is false? No, the Proverbs are different than other forms of biblical literature in that they present truisms, things that are generally true in life, but they're not promises or commands. All right, so Solomon here is not saying every time, every situation, all through history, the evil always bow down before the good. But he is saying that generally speaking, this is the case, that God will exalt the humble and he will put down the proud. But there are times when that is not the case. So we'll discuss that in much more detail when we get to wisdom literature later in this module, but I thought I would at least point that out here. Okay, any questions on the parallelism here? All right, let's go to the next one. Kazot, I don't know. Can you do this, or is it too difficult where you are? Can you see this?
It's okay, Pastor Tim. It's okay, Pastor Tim. Yeah.
Okay, Proverbs 16.
Commit your works. Commit your works to the Lord, and your plans will be established. Commit your works. It's developmental.
Yes, very good. What kind
Reasons
of
or result? Reasons or result? Reasons or result?
Yeah.
Commit your works to the Lord, and the result is your plans will be established.
Yes, I think that's it. All right, because notice it's not, they're not synonymous, because it just, he makes a statement, commit your works to the Lord. If it were synonymous, the next line would be give your ways to God, right? That would be synonymous. But that's not what he said. Notice the second line is different, and your plans will be established. So the first line, he gives an imperative. The second line, he makes a statement. And really, it's not an imperative as much as it's a condition. If you commit your ways to the Lord, then your plans will be established. Okay? So here, the next line, and now the next line is not just adding information, it's a certain kind of information, because you might say, well, wait a minute, isn't the second line, isn't this developmental addition? Well, he is adding a statement, more information, but here the way it's connected, that's what we're trying to figure out. We are trying to determine what, let's see, what is the connection between the two lines? Okay, oh, that's what I did wrong. What is the connection between the two lines? All right, that's the key. the connection. How are they connected? So in this case, the second line is giving more information, and it's not synonymous, it's not contrastive, but it is also not adding, because the second line is really telling us what is the result. And so in some way, it's almost like he's saying, if you commit your ways to the Lord, then your plans will be established. That's the idea or the concept here. Okay? So I think a developmental result is the best understanding. Line 2 is the result of line 1. And we might say, because it's a proverb, it's the potential result. All right, that's why I said if you commit, then plans will be established. Any questions on that?
It's the same also, Pastor, if you're going to replace if you're going to replace the end with so that.
Correct.
Your works to the Lord, so that
Yeah, you
your
could
plans
say,
will be established.
right, so that your plans will be established. And by the way, in the Hebrew, the word used that's translated here as and could also be translated so that, let me look it up real quick just to make sure. Proverbs 16. Yeah. The word that's translated and can also be, depending on context, translated as a so that. All right. So you could say it this way as well. The concept that the poet, that Solomon is conveying here is do this so that your plans will be established. That's the idea. Okay? And the Hebrew word there that translated as and could be translated so that, or if the idea of a result. Hebrew is more difficult because word context really is what can determine the meaning of particular words. Hebrew, it's even more of a challenge, but this is the idea. Okay, so it's developmental result.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Good job, Kazot. That was very good. All right, Brother Alex, you're there. We've got Proverbs 16:4 just for you.
I'm here, Pastor.
Okay, we have a special gift for you. Can you do Proverbs 16:4 for us?
Thank you for the gift. Proverbs 16:4. The Lord has made everything for its own purpose, even the wicked for the day of evil. Okay, so I believe it's contrastive because it is contrasting uh, yes, as I've said, I believe. It looks like it's contrasting the good from the evil because somehow in the first line, it is implied that the Lord is making everything for its own purpose for the good and even the wicked for the day of evil. So I believe that's contrastive.
Now, yes, if he had said good, or something like it, I think you would be right. But notice he didn't. He says he's made everything. So he hasn't implied whether it's good or evil. He just says he's made everything for its own purpose. And then he narrows the idea by saying even the wicked for the day of evil.
including evil.
So yeah, this second line isn't really saying the same thing as the first.
Good verse.
Narrowing its idea. it's not really, I don't see the contrast there. Again, if he had said something like this,
Time,
the
sir.
Lord has made, good things, that would be a contrastive, or even the Lord has made, the Lord has made the righteous, something like that. Then those would be contrastive. But he didn't. He said the Lord made everything for its own purpose.
Because what I have in mind was Romans 8:28.
Right. But that's not necessarily what he's saying here. Okay. Everything just means everything. So, yes, God causes all things to work together for good.
Yes.
Import other passages at this point, right? We have to be
Because
careful.
of the word purpose, huh?
Yeah. It sounds like,
Everything and purpose.
yeah. But remember in Romans 8:28, he says he causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. He doesn't mention the wicked or evil in that passage either. So we really can't use that here at this point.
But still, it includes everything.
Yeah. But here, we got to look at just between these two lines. Is the first line imply good? Well, we'd have to assume that. I don't think you can, because he just uses the term for everything. God's made all things for their purpose. Even, that word's an important word here, even the wicked for the day of evil.
Is it Pastor Chiasm?
Okay, if a chiasm would be, the second line would be in reverse. So if this were a chiasm, it would be something like, he would have said something like, the Lord has made everything for its own purpose, for its own end. God has created, okay, that would be a chiasm. All right, the end of the first,
Developmental.
the beginning of the second. Okay, so it's not a chiasm. I would also say it's not synonymous or a contrastive.
Developmental illustration, Pastor Tim.
Okay, hold on a second. I'm going to ask you to explain that in a minute. Let me just move a couple things around here. It's not contrastive, and that's the example of contrastive. It's not chiasm. This would be the example of chiasm. Now, Sid just said, he says it's developmental, and then what'd you say? Illustration.
Mental illustration. Even
Okay.
the wicked for the day of evil.
Yes. I think it is an illustration being given here. He has a broad statement, and then he gives a narrow example. God's made everything for its own purpose, and let me illustrate that. The wicked have been made for the day of evil. So I think the second line illustrates the idea of the first. Okay, because again, notice, whoops. He goes from a broad statement to a narrow example. Okay. All right, some of these are challenging. And yes, we are doing interpretation at this point, but just like when we looked at diagramming and other steps, I mean, you have to have some degree of interpretation as you look at a particular step in the process. And later on, we can come back and maybe correct some things if we didn't get it are right, but I think in this case, that one makes the most sense. All right, it's not synonymous because he's not contrasting good here in the first line. He doesn't mention good, all right, or the righteous or the wise, all right. He doesn't contrast the wise with the wicked or the righteous with the wicked. And also, too, by the way, its own purpose is not similar to the day of evil. Okay? If it had said, the Lord's made the good for the day of, or the Lord has made the wise for the day of good, and the wicked for the day of evil, that would be contrastive. Okay? Or if he said, so we're not contrasting two ideas here. The second line seems to be developing the first line. And in this case, the way it develops the first line is it's giving us an example. Maybe we could think of it that way. Sorry about that. My Wi-Fi went back. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's okay.
Yes, sir.
Oop, I lost a few guys, huh? Some people didn't agree with me.
Loud and clear.
All right, I'm not sure where I broke off. But basically, I was saying that in the first line, it's not synonymous because he's not contrasting the righteous and the wicked. He says he's made everything. And then also for its own purpose is different than the day of evil. If he had said the Lord has made the righteous for the day of good and the wicked for the day of evil, that would be a contrast. But he didn't say that. He makes a general statement. He's made everything for its own purpose. And then he gives an example of that, an illustration of that in that second line. All right. Okay, this was a little more challenging one. Any questions on that?
And so far.
All right, let's keep going. We'll just keep doing examples, and hopefully, as we do more and more, I think you'll be able to spot it more quickly, what kind of parallelism we have. Proverbs 10, verse 5, back up to Brio. Can you do this one? Proverbs 10, verse 5.
Yes, sir. I will try, sir.
All right.
Proverbs 10, verse 5. He who gathers in summer is a son who acts wisely, but he who sleeps in the harvest is a son who acts shamefully.
Interesting.
Sir, I think this by Kola is more on contrast.
Okay, let's test that. By the way, nice use of the poetry term, the bicola. Wow, this guy's a Hebrew scholar now. Okay, what's being contrasted?
The other one, he who gathers, the contrast with but he who sleeps. The other one, showing that he is industrious. The other one is lazy.
Yes. Okay, notice how these, see how different this is from the previous one. Here we clearly have a contrast. We have he who gathers in the summer versus he who sleeps in the harvest. Those are two opposites, right? The guy sleeping and the one working. And then we have is a son. Now those are the same, and in contrast, we'll see that there'll be some similarity. But notice the first one is the son who acts wisely, and that's contrasted with the one who acts shamefully. Okay, So notice the way it is worded, they're both worded very similarly. The grammar is almost the same. He who gathers in the summer, he who sleeps in harvest, is a son, who acts. So this the way it's stated is very similar, except it's two opposite people and two opposite outcomes or statements. Okay, you guys see that? Again, compare this to the one we previously had. You don't see in that previous verse the same exact contrast, do you? These two lines are not as similar to each other. All right, and they're not saying exactly contrasting idea. The second line is a more narrow statement of the first. But in this example, here we clearly have two different kinds of sons who are described in two different ways, two opposite ways. Okay? All right, good. Brio, let me ask you to do, I'm going to have you guys do two at a time now. Proverbs 3:19.
Proverbs 3:19, the Lord by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding, he established the heaven. It's same, sir, developmental, sir.
Okay.
The first
How is
line
it-
develop.
How is it developmental?
I will try to find, sir. The Lord by his wisdom. The Lord by his wisdom. I think, sir, it seems like also synonymous, wisdom and understanding. But
Yeah,
I'm rather, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Unfounded and established. It
Yeah.
seems like
See that?
similar, yes.
Okay, so established, founded. Well, he
Yes.
established. So we'll do that. The Lord founded, he established. The earth,
And the heavens.
the heavens. All right. Yeah, hello, Alex. When your screen went black, mine did too. So I had trouble. I thought you left because you were upset with me.
No, why should I? I love you.
No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, Brio, take a look now. I think it does look more like they are synonymous, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now what might throw you is the word order was a little different in the second verse. The Lord, it didn't say the Lord founded by wisdom the earth. It said the Lord by wisdom founded the earth. And then the second line, notice, by understanding he established. So the subject, he, and the Lord, we could even do this. So the word order is a little bit different in the second verse. Just the subject is moved a little bit. But clearly, these are synonymous. They're expressing the same idea and same grammar, almost grammatical structure. Very close, anyway.
Yes.
By wisdom, by understanding, founded, established, the earth and the heavens. Now you might say, well, wait a minute. The earth and the heavens, those aren't the same thing. But we still see this in synonymous parallelism. It's still expressing the same idea that God created the earth and he created the heavens. I mean, that's the idea. So they're still synonymous in terms of what the author is communicating here. And the way he communicates it is very similar. Now, one thing you might want to ask yourself is, okay, now why is the second line in reverse order, why does the second line have a different order there? Could it possibly be that there's a chiasm here? All right? Because here's the problem, and sometimes the English translation does not show a chiasm when it is in the Hebrew. So you're thinking, well, how would I know then? Well, you remember before we went and looked at the interlinear? You guys remember that? Well, here, again, the interlinear can be our friend. So we might have the question, when we see this translation, we might think, oh, wait a minute, is this a possible chiasm or not? Well, the way it's worded here, it is not. But because there is a difference, maybe the original Hebrew is different. Let me just show you something. If the English was like this, the Lord founded the earth by wisdom, and if it by understanding the heavens he established, that would be a chiasm. All right. Now it's possible there are times where the English translation rearranges the word order to make it more understandable. But sometimes they do that at the expense of hiding a chiasm. All right. Here's the challenge with translating poetry is probably, I would say, the most difficult for translators. And here's why. Because translators, when you deal with poetry, you have two equally important issues to consider. One is you want to accurately translate the idea or the meaning of the passage, right? So they're trying to find a translation that will help the reader of that language to understand what it's saying. But with poetry, you also need to try to match the poetic expression. And that's really hard to do for translations, especially in English. It's really hard to match the meaning in the translated language and the poetic way that meaning is conveyed. So sometimes what happens, and I really don't like this, but it happens, is that English translations will, in order to try to make the meaning more clear, they will reverse the chiasm. Okay, now I don't know if they did that here, so let's check. You guys follow what I'm saying right now? Do you have any questions? I'm going to show you, and you'll see some examples of this when we get to Psalm 51. But here's how we would determine. You might be suspicious when you read this translation, say, I do see the second line has some difference in the word order. Maybe there's a chiasm here that the English translation didn't pick up. Let me check the interlinear to see. Or sometimes you can first do this. You can first look at the other translations just to see what they did. So let's do that first. All right, we're in Proverbs 3. Proverbs 3, verse 19. Okay. Now let's look at the other translations. Let's see. All right. New American Standard, which is the one we're using. The Lord by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding, he established the heavens. Do you guys see that up here in the upper corner? Can you see that? Is the font big enough? I hope. All right. ESV, the Lord by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding, he established the heavens. Okay, same exact order. Now here, NIV, by wisdom, the Lord laid the earth's foundations. By understanding, he set the heavens in place. So there they put by wisdom first. So then it's exactly synonymous. The Net Bible, by wisdom, same thing. They put by wisdom first, but then look what they did. By wisdom, the Lord laid the foundation of the earth. He established the heavens by understanding. Well, they moved that one too. Okay, how about the New King James? The Lord by wisdom founded the earth, by understanding established the heavens. So most of the English translations are similar. Let's just check and see what the interlinear says, and then we'll move on. Interlinear, remember we go to, oops, sorry, that's not it. Interlinear, here. We go to BibleHub.com. And we want to go to Proverbs 3:19. And then we press interlin here. Here we go. All right, here's the verse. Now again, remember, Hebrew, we read from right to left, not left to right. So we start over here. Here's the verse number. So start there. Okay, Yahweh, by wisdom, founded the earth. All right, that's the literal, that's the word order. Yahweh's first, then by wisdom, then the verb founded the earth. The second line, he established the heavens by understanding. All right, so not really an obvious chiasm here. There is a change in the word order, but not a complete reversal. All right. But we will see some examples in a little bit where the Hebrew does show a chiasm, the English translation does not. Okay. All right. And if you're not tracking, if you're not following me so far, we'll come back to this, and hopefully it'll be more clear. But in this case, synonymous is the correct type of parallelism. All right, questions? All right, Sir Sid, I'm going to give you Proverbs 17:14.
Proverbs 17:14, the beginning of strife is like letting out water. So abandon the quarrel before it breaks out. Because of the presence of so, it's like therefore.
Okay, you cut out the beginning. You're muted. What did you say? What kind of parallelism is it?
Developmental result, because of the presence of so, it's similar to therefore.
Okay. Okay, what is the instruction being given here? Notice the structure here. The first line is a statement, right?
Yeah,
The second line
statement
is an instruction. So I agree it's developmental. How are the lines connected? Is the second line the result of the first? Is the first line the result of the second? Or what do you think?
developmental addition. I changed my mind.
Oh, you say addition now? Is that what you said?
It's addition. Addition, not
Okay.
result.
Is he making two statements though? Or yeah, is it two statements?
That's the statement.
Okay, because the second is an instruction, right? Abandon the quarrel. So he's saying abandon the quarrel before it breaks out. And I think he's saying that because he gives the reason for it in the first line. You see that? What I like to do is look for, often in Proverbs, you'll have an instruction. Either you'll have two statements or you'll have two instructions, but sometimes you'll have an instruction and a statement or a command and a statement in there. And so oftentimes that's going to have a developmental relationship, which you are correct. But it's also going to often be either I think in this case, because he gives a statement, then he gives an instruction. And I think
Sir,
these, yeah, go ahead.
It could be an explanation, sir. Beginning of the strife is like letting out of water. So abandon the quarrel before it breaks. It seems that explanation here.
Okay. Let's see. We've got, so these three possibilities, right? Explanation, expansion, or reason result. Now, if it's expansion, basically he's going to make two statements about something. So if it were expansion, it would be something like the beginning of strife is like letting out water. And quarreling leads to problems. Okay, that would be the example of addition. He's making a statement about strife. He's saying two things about strife. Okay, that would be the example of an expansion. That's not what he's doing here, though. Explanation would be something like the beginning of strife is like letting out water. You will not be able to stop its consequences. Okay, notice in this example, the second line is explaining the first. How is the beginning of strife like letting out water? Well, you won't be able to stop its consequence or something like that. It's explaining the statement. All right. But the result or the reason here, notice, and Sid, you pointed this out. You were on the right track at the beginning, I think. What the verse says is the beginning of strife is like letting out water. So abandon the quarrel before it breaks out. That's his instruction. Abandon the quarrel before it breaks out. Why? Because the beginning of strife is like letting out water. If you put a crack in the dam, it's just going to keep getting bigger. So I think it is the reason. All right. The first line is the reason for the second. I don't know if you can see that. Do you understand my reasoning, my thought process here? In comparing.
Yes.
All right. It's clearly developmental. He's not saying the same thing twice, and he's not contrasting. That's not the relationship here. It is developmental. The question is what kind. And so that's why I've noted here three different, what each would look like. An explanation would look something like this. The second line would be explaining, giving understanding to the first. Expansion, the second line would be giving more information about what he said in the first line. But the reason or result is that one line will be giving the reason or result for the other. And typically, one of the lines is an instruction, the other line is a statement in that case. Notice here, if it were an explanation, these are both statements. The same for expansion, they're both statements. But in reason result, you're going to have one line that's an instruction and the other line that's a statement. And Sid, yeah, that word so I think was a key word to notice there. Any questions on that? Or, you can disagree with me, that's fine. Let's talk it out. I want to hear what you have to say, and we can.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Sid, how about you? Do you see that, or you still?
I concur.
Okay. Okay. All right. Again, that the developmental ones are usually can be a little bit of a challenge. They're not always straightforward. All right, let's go a couple more examples and then, whoops, what happened here? Okay. Sid, did I give you only one? Was that your first one?
This one, Proverbs 10:22.
Yeah, go ahead.
Proverbs 10:22. It is the blessing of the Lord that makes rich, and he adds no sorrow to it. Developmental addition because of the word adds.
Okay, developmental. And then you said addition?
Yes, sir, because of the word add.
Yeah, the word and is here. That might indicate addition. And also, too, notice he makes a statement here. It is the blessing of the Lord that makes rich. So that's a statement. And then the next line, he adds no sorrow to it. That's a statement. All right. And yeah, I think he's just giving more. He's adding more to it. It's the blessing of the Lord that makes rich. And in addition, he adds no sorrow to it. Okay. It's clearly not synonymous because it's a different verb here. It is the blessing. That's a statement of being, whereas the second line is a statement of action, right? It is versus he adds. So it's not synonymous here. And it appears to be, so it's definitely developmental. There's no contrast here. He's not contrasting two things. Both have to deal with his blessing. So there must be developmental, and it seems like he's just making two statements. So he's adding more information in the second line. Okay. Line 2 adds to line 1. All right. Okay. Alan, how about you try the next one?
Proverbs 10:32. The lips of the righteous bring forth what is acceptable, but the mouth of the wicked what is perverted. It's contrastive.
Okay, what's being contrasted?
The lips of the righteous, the mouth of the wicked brings forth what is acceptable. So there's ellipsis there.
You got the last ellipsis, didn't you? I forgot about that. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, the mouth of the wicked, what is perverted. So the contrast is what is acceptable, what is perverted.
Yes. Okay, good. So notice here a couple things. All right. And you pick this up right away, Alan. Notice the second line didn't have a verb in it. All right. Yeah. It was literally the mouth of the wicked, what is perverted. Well, that doesn't make sense without a verbal idea. The first line provides that verbal idea because, again, for terseness sake, there was ellipsis here. And notice we have an exact contrast. The lips of the righteous, the mouth of the wicked, opposite. Okay, bring forth and bring forth. So the verbal idea is the same, and that's okay because the contrast is not in the verb, it's in the subjects and in the result then. The object. The lips of the righteous bring forth what is acceptable, but the wicked perverted. So those are opposites. So this is clearly contrastive. The concepts are contrasting, and we have the grammatical structure is almost the same. You see that? And then here, the word but is put in there. The translators recognizing that this is contrastive, so they indicate that with the word but here. All right. Okay, very good. Alan, why don't you take the next one?
Proverbs 17:18. A man lacking incense pledges and becomes guarantor in the presence of his neighbor. Developmental.
Okay. Yeah, notice there's nothing here that shows that it's synonymous or contrasting. The grammar's different. Okay, what kind of developmental? That's the question now.
Expansion.
Okay. What's being expanded?
Still, the man who lacks sense. Who pledges. So the result will be he becomes the guarantor in the presence of his neighbor. Or is it reason or result?
Reason or result.
Maybe. Yeah, I think this one is a little bit more of a challenge here because of that word becomes.
Seems it is
result.
illustration or explanation. Developmental
Okay, we have a third one. Explanation. Yeah, this one is
the man lacking senses, it is being explained that become guarantor.
yeah, I mean, in this one you could probably make a case for any of these. I think I had put result because of that word becomes, that he pledges, and as a result he becomes a guarantor in the presence of his neighbor. But I think you can make a case for the other two types in this case as well. This one's a little tougher. Probably take more effort in doing some study of the different words used in these verses and kind of what they mean to know for sure. Sometimes what I will do, if it's not clear, maybe it's a translation issue. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll look at the other translations and just see if that helps give me some insight. So let's just do that for
Pastor Tim, when it
Yeah.
becomes ambiguous, we will put it to formal, ambot.
Well, it's not ambut because it's clearly developmental. The second line is developing the first. The way it's developing, that's where it's not as clear. So ambut is only a rare usage. Let's look at the other translations. Just see, maybe the New American Standard made this harder to understand. Well, let's just see. Okay, New American Standard up in the upper left corner. A man lacking in sense pledges and becomes guarantor, presence of his neighbor. ESV, one who lacks sense gives a pledge and puts up security in the presence of his neighbor. Now that sounds like expansion, right? Adding two. So he's mentioning two things. He gives a pledge and puts up security. Let's look at the NIV. A man lacking in judgment strikes hands in pledge and puts up security for his neighbor. That sounds like expansion again. Let's look at the New King James. A man devoid of understanding shakes hands in pledge and becomes surety for his friend. Well, that kind of goes back to result because of that word becomes. The Net Bible, the one who lacks wisdom strikes hands in pledge and puts up financial security for his neighbor. That sounds like expansion as well. So the translations, notice how it's translated can affect our understanding of how it's being developed here. So, like I said, in this case, it probably needs a little more study of these particular words before one could determine. As I look at the Hebrew text here on this side, a man lacking in his heart, lacking sense, lacking understanding in his heart. And then here's that verb, which isn't becomes. What is this one? I don't recognize that one. I'm going to cheat here and look it up. Oh, security. Okay. Security. Okay. In the face of his neighbor. Yeah, it's a addition, expansion. All right, so you'd have to, when you did word studies on this verse, you would be able to see that it's not saying he becomes guarantor. It is literally that he is being a surety in the presence of his neighbor, before his neighbor. So it's adding to the statement, the first line. But the English is not as clear. So if you were to put expansion or result or even illustration, I think you could make a case for that based on the English translation. All right, but it's not ambut. It's clearly developmental. We're just not sure which way it's developing here from the English translation. All right, questions on that? Ambut? I don't know. Okay. Go back to our notes. All right, one more here. Brother Arn, we'll give this one to you. Proverbs 17, verse 25.
Proverbs 17, verse 25. A foolish son is a grief to his father, and bitterness to her who bore him. A son, foolishness, bitterness, foolish son, bitterness, and is it, Pastor? Developmental?
Okay, in what way?
Expansion or addition.
Okay, well, let's talk it through. So we have a foolish son here.
Yes.
There doesn't seem to be, we have to his father, to her who bore him, that's his mother, right? A poetic
Mother.
Is a grief
To his father, bitterness to her mother.
So again, and it looks like maybe a foolish son notice we have grief and bitterness. Okay, we don't is been deleted here. Okay.
I see.
We have his grief and bitterness. That's similar to his father, to her who bore him, or to her mother, his mother. Those are similar. So it almost seems like this could be synonymous, right?
Right, Pastor.
He just left out foolish son in the second line, and is. Okay, a foolish son is a grief to his father, and a foolish son is bitterness to her who bore him. Okay, now again, this would be redundant. It would, I think the idea is still there, right? The second line still referring to a foolish son. So I think synonymous seems more likely here, because grief and bitterness are similar, and to his father and to the mother are also similar, his parents. So I would see synonymous. But if you said expansion, I mean, that would be okay, because he's saying the foolish son is one way for his father, and also and another for his mother. So, but to me, synonymous probably makes a little more sense.
Thank you, Pastor.
All right, any questions on that? Is everybody okay? Any of the examples? Now, again, the value of doing this is it just forces us to think more deeply about how these lines relate to each other in a verse. All right, this is just part of the interpretive process to get our minds to consider the options. All right, so this step is sort of forces us to be more intentional in how we're looking at and thinking about the passage. If we didn't consider parallelism, we would not be forcing ourselves to really try to understand how these lines relate to each other. Because again, we know that they do relate to one another somehow. That's the nature of Hebrew poetry. And so oftentimes we can see or gain better understanding of relationship based upon, or better understanding of what the author's saying based upon seeing that relationship. Let's go to a very famous psalm. We'll see how far we can get. I want to take you guys to Psalm 51. All right, I think we're probably all familiar with this psalm. Who can tell me who wrote this psalm? Psalm 51. David, right? Be gracious to me, O God, according to your loving kindness, according to the greatness of your compassion. Blot out my transgressions, right? We remember this wonderful psalm. And when did it take place in David's life? In fact, let's just do this first. Let's read the psalm. I'll have each of you guys a few verses. And then so we'll start with you, Brother Arn. If you could read the first, whoops, what happened there? Psalm 51. Okay. Brother Arn, if you could read verses 1 to 3, Michael verses 4 to 6, Alex 7 to 9, James, you could read 10 through 12, Brio, if you could read 13 to 15, and then Alan, if you could finish it. All right. So Arn, why don't you start us? Verses 1 to 3.
Psalm 51 verses 1 to 3 says, be gracious to me, O God, according to your loving kindness, according to the great of your compassion, blot out my transgression. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgression and my sin is ever before me.
All right, Michael, 4 to 6.
Against you only I have sinned. I have sinned and done what is evil in your sight, so that you are justified when you speak, and blameless You will make me your judge. Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin my mother conceived me. Behold, you desired truth in the innermost being, and in the hidden part you will make me know wisdom.
All right.
Purify me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Make me to hear joy and gladness. Let the bones which you have broken rejoice. Hide your face from my sins and blot out all my iniquities.
And create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me away from your presence, and do not take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and sustain me with a willing spirit.
Verse 13. Then I will teach transgressors your ways, and the sinner will be converted to you. Deliver me from blood guiltiness, O God, the God of my salvation. Then my tongue will joyfully sing of your righteousness. O Lord, open my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise.
Unmute yourself, Alan.
I will read the rest, Pastor Tim.
Yeah, go ahead.
16. For you do not delight in sacrifice, otherwise I would give it. You are not pleased with burnt. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart, O God, you will not despise. By your favor, do good to Zion, build the walls of Jerusalem. Then you will delight in righteous sacrifices, in burnt offering and whole burnt offering. Then young bulls will be offered on your altar.
Okay. As I said, I'm sure this psalm is familiar to us. Notice the introduction tells us who wrote it and when he wrote it. Let me read that. A psalm of David when Nathan the prophet came to him after he'd gone to Bathsheba. And we know exactly where this event took place and what he's talking about, right? At what point in time, when was this psalm written? What had happened? Can somebody tell me that?
The psalm written after David committed adultery.
Yes. Committed adultery with Bathsheba. Then he tried to hide it, cover it up. He had her husband was killed in battle. And then Nathan the prophet came to David and confronted him, right? And then David confessed his sin. And this is in 2 Samuel chapter 12. And so it is likely that evening, as he was considering the consequences would be of a sin, which is when I believe he penned gave this prayer. And so let's look at each line here and just look at the parallelism that we see. We're probably not going to get through very many, but let's just go through it. I think you'll find this very helpful. All right, where did we leave off? I think I forgot who did the last. James, I don't think you've had a chance to do the parallelism yet. Can you do verse 1 for us?
Be gracious to me, O God, according to your loving kindness, according to the greatness of your compassion. block out my transcription. Developmental,
Okay. In what way?
bless you, according to your loving kindness, according to the greatness and passion. Developmental of the
Do you notice something? How about the way these two lines are, the order of the words? Do you see anything there that looks? How does the order of the words compare in the first line to the second?
developmental expansion, like that. Developmental expansion.
Okay, is he adding to or is he restating? Here, because look with me. He says, "Be gracious to me, O God," and then notice he says, "according to your loving kindness." And then he says, "according to the greatness of your compassion, blot out my transgression."
Well, am I right? Developmental and horizons, like that.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last.
What is the, am I correct? Developmental and then response or result?
Well,
Or
notice he's saying basically the same thing, almost. We see here, I think, we haven't seen one of these yet, a chiasm. Because notice the first line, right, is "Be gracious to me, O God, according to your loving kindness." And then notice the second line, he starts with, "according to your compassion, blot out my transgressions." Do you see? He reverses the second line compared to the first. According to your loving kindness, according to your compassion. So he ends the first line, according to your loving kindness, and he begins the second line, according to your compassion. Compassion, loving kindness, those are synonymous. He's saying the same thing. So he gives an instruction or a request. "Be gracious to me, O God." And then a basis for that request, "according to your loving kindness." And then in the next line, he gives the basis. I'm gonna have to make this font smaller.
Pastor Tim, are you typing? Because we cannot.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for telling me. I'm sorry about that. All right, here we go. This is what I've been doing. I've been trying to hide it from you, but Michael caught me. Okay.
Chiasm.
Okay, I don't know if you guys can see this. So notice the first line of verse 1 is here. "Be gracious to me, O God, according to your loving kindness." The second line, he reverses and then he starts with, "according to your compassion, blot out my transgressions." Okay? So actually what he's doing here is a chiasm.
Okay.
And it's really almost synonymous. He's almost making the same request here. Be gracious to me, blot out my transgression, I think is a parallel idea. And we see that because that second line, according to your loving kindness and according to your compassion, those are synonymous. All right. But he's changed the order of the words intentionally. So he starts the second line the same way he ended the first line. You guys see that?
Yes.
He did that on purpose. All right. It's a poetic expression, but also it's a poetic expression intended to draw attention to the line he reversed. So in this case, he's drawing attention to the basis. The basis of his request is the character of God. Okay?
Mhm.
And so I think here we have a chiasm, and I think it's a synonymous because he's making a same kind of a request.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes.
Any questions on that?
And so far. That's okay.
All right, James, you want to give try the second verse there?
Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. Wash me and cleanse me are similar.
Yes.
Thoroughly from my iniquity, from my sin are similar. So synonymous.
Yes, I think you're right. Okay, we have wash me, cleanse me, wash me thoroughly from
Again, ellipsis.
no, I don't think we have any ellipsis here. I think both are complete statements. From my iniquity, from my sin. Notice this is definitely synonymous. All right. Now, here's what I mentioned to you earlier. Let me show you the interlinear. So from the English translations, clearly synonymous. All right. And what you're going to have to do is confirm with like when you do diagramming, you want to also look at other translations real quick just to see how similar they are. So for example, let's do that with this verse. So normally you do the parallelism, do it in your translation, but then go and look at maybe another translation and see what it says. Notice it says, wash me thoroughly from my iniquity, cleanse me from my sin. That's exactly the same as the New American Standard. Let's look at the NIV. Psalm 51 here. Here we go. Psalm 51, verse 2, the ESV, the NIV, wash away all my iniquity, cleanse me from my sin. So that's pretty similar. The Net Bible, wash away my wrongdoing, cleanse me of my sin. Okay, that's similar. Wash me thoroughly, New King James, from my iniquity, cleanse me from my sin. Okay, the Christian Standard Bible, completely wash away my guilt, cleanse me from my sin. Okay, so all of these are very close to one another. So they all show synonymous. So then we want to go, okay, well, let me look at the interlinear just to confirm. Now, James, what do you see here? Okay, we start from the right. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger for you. Okay, start from the right. It's thoroughly wash me from my iniquity. Do you see that? Now, how does the next line start?
From my sin,
From my sin, cleanse me.
cleanse me.
See anything similar here? From my iniquity is the end of the first line. From my sin is the beginning of the second line.
Mhm.
What is that? What do we call that?
Chiasm.
Chiasm.
It's a chiasm.
Chiasm.
So this is what, let me go back to our thing here. All right, so I put in the literal here below. This is the New American Standard, and really the ESV. Most of the English translations are the same, but notice here, literally, it's wash me thoroughly or thoroughly wash me. Right this is from the interlinear. Let me put that. Thoroughly wash me from my iniquity, and from my sin cleanse me. There's a reverse. The first line of verse 2, or line 2, the first phrase from line 2 is how the last phrase of line 1 ends. This is what I was telling you earlier. The English translations didn't show that. Okay, they emphasized trying to make the meaning clear by just saying, wash me thoroughly from my iniquity, cleanse me from my sin. Now, the meaning of those words, they got exactly right. All right? Those words, they translated correctly. But they did not follow the word order of the original Hebrew. And in this case, I think that's important. Because in this case, clearly the author reversed the second line compared to the first. So this is what the author, this is how we should see this. Okay. This is typically how we would show a chiasm, because the first line and the last line of the chiasm match, right? Wash me, cleanse me. Same idea. Synonyms, different word, but same idea. From my iniquity, from my sin, same idea. But because the author changed the word order of the second line, and it's exactly in reverse, this is actually not just synonymous, it's a chiasm. It is synonymous, but it's chiasm. Why does that matter? Again, brothers, as I said, with Hebrew poetry, one of the great things about Hebrew poetry is it guides us in how it is emphasizing things. The author shows us what he is emphasizing and what he's drawing attention to by using poetic devices. One of those devices is called a chiasm, okay? Where the author intentionally reverses the order of the words in the second line to be like a mirror. The beginning of the second line is the same as the end of the first line. He flips it like you do it like in a mirror. Why does he do that? Because he's emphasizing his iniquity and his sin in this case, in verse 2. He's drawing attention to my iniquity, my sin. There's emphasis there. All right? So we want to be able to catch things like a chiasm because that is the author's way of guiding us. It'd be like this. In English, you might say it, you know, if we were to take the English translation here, it'd be like saying, wash me thoroughly from, be like doing this. Okay? Notice I'm drawing attention to something. What am I drawing attention to? From my iniquity, from my sin.
My sin.
Right? I could even do this. Maybe even make it more. Try again. Okay, see what I'm doing? I'm intentionally trying to draw your attention to this phrase, right? Well, that is exactly what a chiasm does, just in a different way, right? We don't have the original Hebrew manuscript, so we don't know if he underlined it or bolded it. You know, he probably didn't, but he used the chiasm to communicate the same idea. He's emphasizing that line, his iniquity, his sin. And in doing this, men, he's showing us he's taking ownership for his sin. He's taking responsibility that it is his fault. My iniquity, my sin. Okay, so he's actually instructing us here of what it genuine repentance, what it looks like is you take responsibility for your sin. And David is emphasizing that idea by using this chiasm here. So not only is he it's not just an expression of wanting forgiveness, but it is an emotional appeal that demonstrates, that shows he's taking ownership for that sin. And again, that is all seen by the fact that he uses a chiasm here. That's an intentional technique to draw attention to the particular phrase that was being reversed. Any questions on that or thoughts? Does that make sense? No questions? You ready for lunch? Well, it looks like Michael and James got too hungry. They left us. Sir Sid looks like...
Sir Tim.
Yeah, Alan.
It's like, it's only my reflection of what it was before during biblical times and our time today. Before, they could be so poetic in their expressions. And of course, they would use poetry to express their deep feelings. But today, when we write, we only have to caps lock our words. We don't have to be poetic. We just italicize or underline. No poetry anymore. Just a reflection of it in terms of comparison. It's like that ba? In my thinking, it's like today this is how we would emphasize things by highlighting the letters or underlining or coloring. There's no poetry. but before it's through poetry or repetition or like that chiasm. It's so different.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, good observation. Any other thoughts or comments, questions? Okay. Well, we'll pick up on this psalm next time we gather, and I would like to encourage you, try to take a few minutes this week, go through the rest of the psalm yourself, and just try it. All right. I think that'll really benefit you in our discussion next week if you have gone through the verses yourself, and then we'll go through them together and as an exercise. Okay. All right.
Thank you,
Wow.
Pastor Tim.
Thank you,
We
brothers.
learned a lot. We learned a lot.
Good. I'm glad. I appreciate that. Alex, maybe would you close us in prayer?
Sure, pleasure. Lord, we give thanks to you, O Lord, for once again you have given us this time and opportunity to learn from your word, to learn from different identifications, how to recognize, Lord, uh, the different types of presentation in the Bible. And we pray, dear Lord, that we will understand more of this, oh God. We thank you, Lord, for our teacher, Pastor Tim, and all of us for the blessing this morning, oh God. So once again, thank you for everything, and we look forward to our next session, oh God. We pray that you will continue to protect us, Lord God. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
All right.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you,
All right.
Pastor.
Thank you, Pastor Tim.
See you next
Thank you, everyone.